Hello, comrades. I experienced it once more. An encounter with a shadow figure this morning. It's morning now in my country when I'm writing this to you at 5:53 a.m. I was in a state of dreaming and reality when I first woke up before it happened. It was like dreaming, but even when you are awake, you think it's still the real world. So I was not fully awake, and multiple thoughts came to my mind, thinking I was still in the dream. I simply accepted everything, and I fell asleep naturally, continuing my dream. And in the middle of the dream, I woke up still in my body, but I was paralyzed, very common and indescribable sensation. I was so curious to see what was behind me. I fear not the shadow figures now, thanks to my last encounter. I saw his head, and before when I was younger, what I feared the most was seeing his head, but the head was just black. It was not creepy at all. Well, okay, maybe just a little. But it was supposed to be so horrible, but no. It's just a black head. Anyway, I was so curious to see the figure, but it was hard moving. And while I was slowly turning behind me, I said in my head, "Spiritual guide, help me," multiple times. I also wanted, in the same time, to gather all my power of imagination to create a light sword from my thoughts in this astral realm. When I turned almost fully behind me, I saw 3 little bright points of lights. It was beautiful, like stars sharing their light. And behind these lights, guess who it was? The shadow person. But I saw just a little of him. I did not see the complete silhouette. Like always, it was this fog or black mist that was like a dancing energy around the fully black body. So I wanted to become awake. I woke up again, and thinking of it, I wanted to think it was a dream. But after seeing that, something touched my eyebrow, and I felt one hair moved. I felt also the typical energy of these entities in this zone of my face. I was shocked, but not in the same time. He wanted me to know he was still there. Yesterday, I was unconsciously thinking about these shadows. I told my friend it was not happening anymore. Very big and common mistake. Beware of these type of thoughts. When you are thinking like that, you establish energetical contact with these entities. It's like calling them. You must forget these beings and live your life. Pray well if this happens. Sometimes, when it's day, I see more energy fluctuating in my peripheral vision. I see it very well, this dancing energy. So, what do you think? These lights were my guardian angel, spirit guide, pair of lights, another light entity? Before I even get into the story, I know the generic answer to these stories is sleep paralysis. Although I do have that issue sometimes, this is different. When I'm on my way to sleep and I finally find a comfortable position to lay, I usually can only sleep if I'm facing towards the middle of the bed. This thing will come up, and I can feel my bed react to something climbing into it because it sinks down a bit. It then proceeds to just lean over me and breathe as close to my face as possible. I can literally feel it. When I don't react to that, I'll open my eyes. I can feel it get off of the bed from behind me and get back on the other side so that we are face to face. I know this because I can feel the bed react again to it getting on the other side, and now feel the breathing right in front of my face instead of over me. You know when someone gets really close to your face, you can feel like the heat coming off their face, that too. Lastly, with still no reaction from me, it gets off the bed again, but I know it's still in here, just from that feeling you get from someone staring at you. Here we are with the thought that of course this is sleep paralysis. The whole story is generic to exactly that for the most part. This is why I don't think that it's that. I can move. I'm not immobile. It doesn't feel like anything is holding me down. I know I can move because I'm so used to sleep paralysis that I know how to check for it, as this is how I usually transition to a lucid dream, but that's a whole different story. The way that I sleep, I have one hand under me, usually under my pillow, so I just open and close my hand a few times to confirm I can actually move. This works for me in my head, because if there is something there, I can move a little without it knowing. I then move my legs up, get into the fetal position, just to make sure my feet are not hanging off the end of the bed. Too many stories regarding that. Now that I know I can move, this is where I start to get nervous, because now I have to actively try to keep my eyes closed, since I have confirmed I am actually awake. It seems to be right in my face at this point. I can literally feel the sweat coming out of my pores on my entire upper body because I am so nervous. What I have done the last few times when I know it's not on the bed anymore and I'm drenched in sweat to the point I need to move off of the wet spot, I say screw it and jump up from my bed and yell as if that's gonna do anything. When I do though, of course nothing is there. Just a note, I'm 31 years old and this isn't new to me. I have a theory that it might be the lady that sometimes haunts my dreams since I was in pre-K. Another story for another time. It has also crossed my mind that it could be my dad. That's actually worse than the first option to me. Another story again. But basically, I think something is haunting me. I don't think it's sleep paralysis. I just wanted to share the story to see if anyone reads this and has had a similar experience that they don't think is sleep paralysis. When I was a young child, mid to late 90s, I used to have what I believed at the time to be very vivid nightmares. I would be laying in my own bed, completely unable to move any part of my body except my eyes, or make any kind of sound, and the room would become strangely lit, and what I can only describe as fog from dry ice would cover the floor. At that time, I would hear a strange noise, similar to a baby cooing or stirring, but not quite. If you play Minecraft, the noises which ghast make when they're just moving around is almost a dead ringer, and these two human-like entities would walk into my room. They would be wearing gray clothing, like sweatsuits, and their faces, as I remember, were akin to hockey masks, but the entire eye holes were black. Think Shy Guy from Mario. There was a height difference between the two, similar to that which one would expect between a man and wife, yet there were no defining features of either aside from that which could be indicative of gender. Upon entering my bedroom, they would very slowly yet steadily approach me, tilting their heads side to side, as one might do when approaching a dog or newborn baby. They would draw closer and closer, until they reached the edge of my bed, at which time they would just as slowly bend over me, until their faces were feet from mine. I experienced this at least a dozen times, and each time was the same. But I have no memory of what would happen after they bent over me. Around this same time period, I would experience nightmares when I was alone, outside in the middle of the night in the grass or on or near the picnic table beside our lawn, unable to move or make any noise. And I remember waking up from these episodes and sometimes being in my own bed and sometimes being outside and having to make my way back inside with absolutely no memory of how I got out there in the first place. As an adult, I was performing research on sleep paralysis, having never heard of it, and realized that what I described above could be a textbook example of it, and I thought this for about 5 years until I described these episodes to my doctor and nurse during a routine checkup, and they both said it had sounded like I had been visited by aliens. I'm still leaning towards sleep paralysis, but you never know. This happened almost 6 months ago, and I still don't understand it. My roommate occasionally had sleepovers with her boyfriend, which meant I would stay home alone for a night or two. I never minded until that one day. I stayed awake until 2 a.m., studying for a test I had the next day. Everything went as usual when I went to sleep. I locked our front door, turned off all the lights, then closed my bedroom door, turning off my light, and fell asleep. I suddenly woke up and my vision was very blurry. My lights were on and almost blinding me. Then I noticed my door was open and all other lights were on. I kept staring at my door for a few seconds. Then I suddenly saw a creepy figure leaning to the side, staring back at me. It was a very tall man, dressed in all black, face somehow painted black, and I couldn't tell any of his facial features other than his eyes. They were piercing, and he had white, almost silver long hair falling to his knees. We just stared at each other, and I thought I couldn't move. But then, I sat up and followed him, as if it was a friend of mine or a family member. I wasn't scared. I was very calm, but I stopped once I reached my bedroom's entrance. He walked to my open front door, looked at me one last time, somehow smiled, then left. I woke up again, thinking it was just a stupid nightmare, but my lights were on. My bedroom door was open. All lights in my house were on, and my feet had floor dust on them. I ran to my front door and hoping it wasn't open. It was locked, but for some odd reason, my keys weren't attached to the lock, which is a safety measure of mine. I freaked out, then noticed I was late to my test, so I immediately dismissed whatever happened, until a few days later, when I asked a friend of mine who thought I was sleepwalking, but I never sleepwalk. I don't even talk in my sleep. And I'm still to this day terrified. I literally beg my roommate to not leave, and anytime she asks why, I just can't tell her, knowing she won't believe me. Does anyone know what that was? This happened about 5 years ago, and I was living in a different city while going to university. This was in Sweden, so I'm sorry for any errors in this text. Firstly, I'm prone to lucid dreaming and therefore just convinced myself that this was a dream, even though it didn't feel like it. I lived in a small apartment on the 5th floor with a pretty big balcony with glass windows that you could slide open all around. I am very sensitive to light when I sleep, so I usually had the blinds shut both out on the balcony and on the windows that were on the wall between my bedroom and the balcony. One night, I woke up because of a bluish light shining in through the blinds. At first I thought it was the moon, but it felt too bright. I looked towards the balcony to see if I missed closing the blinds out there, which I admittedly had, but I realized it wasn't the moonlight I saw out there. It was much smaller and much closer. It hovered over another apartment complex a couple of 100 meters away. I instantly felt a primal fear I have never felt before. My heart just dropped in my chest, and I had trouble breathing. I couldn't look away, and I couldn't move. Some rational part of me had a quick thought of, is this sleep paralysis? But then I felt eyes on me, many eyes, and I just knew I had to try to hide. I hid under my blanket and closed my eyes hard. I kept thinking, I didn't see anything, I promise, I didn't see anything, over and over again. I had such an adrenaline rush that I was shaking. The next thing I know, it was morning again and my body was aching. I was in pain, but it felt like the pain came from the inside, like when you get lightly shocked from an electrical fence. It hurts really bad for a second, then it's just an overall feeling of ache and tingling. I could still remember everything up until I closed my eyes and hid under the blanket. The ache and the tingles disappeared after a couple hours. I've never told anyone about this, but I feel like you guys won't judge me, and perhaps there are other people that have experienced similar things.